This? Okay. All right. Mary McNally.
Hello, everyone.
Hi there. Mary, thank you for your willingness to be an applicant and for your interest in East Long Meadow. For the sake of a uniform interview protocol, I'm going to still introduce everyone. Marilyn Richards, Ralph Page, Don Anderson, Kathy Hill, Mike Kane, Tom O'Connor, and Pat Henry. We have a variety of questions for you. We have just tried to regulate some of the questions in the interest of time. We would anticipate going at least 45 minutes, but we are not going to shortchange your interview for the sake of the clock.
Okay, thank you.
That said, please take a few minutes to tell us about your specific interest in the position and why you think you'll be successful here as our town manager.
Well, my interest in the position stems from the last 4 months when I was inundated with interest in the position. And with each passing day, it became more interesting, believe it or not, based in part on the number of issues that were presented and the personalities, council members included, but I mean primarily the employees and department heads. And I've always been on the periphery of East Long Meadow and kind of a political hanger-on, if you will, in the sense that one of my, I don't want to call it politics a hobby, but I was always invested in what was going on in my own community. As you know, I live in Springfield and was involved in many boards and commissions and city departments there over the years, but was always in tune with what was going on in East Long Meadow as well, just because of the nature of the proximity of the communities and just interest in political matters that were pending in surrounding communities to where I lived.
What do you understand your role as the town manager to be?
My role?
Mm-hmm.
Well, I see the role as somewhat complex on one hand, but actually easy on another hand. Complex in the sense that there's a lot of responsibility with different departments. You know, I was counting them up a few weeks ago and thinking there's 17 department heads with whom you interact, 17 substantive areas that if you wanted to get into the weeds of all of those could take you a lifetime. We have very capable department heads, and I have an interest in learning as much as I can about each and every one of them, because I think the more you can understand about what problems face a particular department, the better manager I can be. I also want to be able to, in addition to managing the day-to-day operations, which can become mundane, to be truthful, I would like my role here to be more of a, somewhat of a mentoring. I want to help the managers be better managers. I want to help the employees be better employees. I want to, in a sense, inspire them, if I can, to be the best version of themselves that they can be for the benefit of the community and for themselves. That sounds somewhat corny, I suppose, listening to myself, but I mean it sincerely. I think that anyone that works in public service, whether it's a municipality or the Commonwealth or any agency or political subdivision of the Commonwealth, you have to have an interest in the well-being of your community as a whole. And that's something that I have a strong interest in. I think the world needs stronger communities, and I think that each and every person that works here can contribute to that, and that's what I would like to take as my legacy if I ever am old enough to have a legacy.
You don't look a day over 29.
Thank you.
How would you handle personal and political bias in your decision-making with state agencies, private firms, and organizations?
I'm not naive enough to think I don't have biases, but I am mature enough to know how to manage them. I try to use bias as a learning tool. When I perceive it in myself, I try to take that as an opportunity to learn something about someone or some issue that I might feel uncomfortable around or with. I like to view things that you might characterize as problems at first blush. I like to view those as challenges and an opportunity to become a better person and a better employee. So, and I don't really think I have a lot of prejudices. I mean, I was brought up Irish Catholic, so there's a certain subset of things that go with that. But I'm proud of that for the most part, and I think it's helped me to be open-minded. So I try to keep an open mind. That's how I handle bias.
Thank you.
My turn. You've actually hit some of these hit some of these points answering Kathy's question. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to state the three questions, and feel free to kind of elaborate anything further. So again, I've been listening, so you've kind of hit some of this. What type of work culture would you work to create and foster in town hall, and how would you go about accomplishing it? How would you hold employees accountable and maximize their performance? And how would you set goals for departments and for individual employees?
Well, I'm all about cooperation. That's one of my favorite words. I think it's imperative that people that work anywhere, but in a municipality situation, have to cooperate, because as I alluded to earlier, you've got 17 departments, all of which have a subset of substantive knowledge and information and a skill set. None of the other 16 department heads, or 17 counting me, have all that knowledge. So my mantra is, and I've used it already in this short interim period, if you have a skill and you can help someone, you can help one of your colleagues, please do so. Don't hold that back. We don't need to be protective of our skills for fear that if we share them, we'll be less valuable. I mean, I'm 180 degrees in the opposite direction with that. Just sent a memo yesterday to all the department heads encouraging, using that very word. I said, some of you aren't going to like the substance of what this email is about, but help your colleagues where you can. And in the accountability aspect, it's hard to change people's personality or their skill set and their emotional intelligence. But I would mark that. I would consider that a very primary skill that when I'm evaluating employees, I want them to be able to demonstrate to me that they're helping their colleagues and they're cooperating and sharing their information. And I think I missed the second part of your question, Counselor.
It's dealing with accountabilities of employees and to maximize their performance. And then the last part was setting goals for departments and individual employees.
Yeah. Well, so many of the projects in town cross over different departments, that the DPW helps the police, the fire helps the police, the emergency dispatch is helped by police and fire, the health department is all over the place doing a multitude of tasks, the recycling, the trash pickup. I mean, the library helps people. So there's an interaction and an interrelationship that's necessary, and that's what I want to see, that's what I want to foster, which is not to say it doesn't exist now, but there are ways that it could be better. And I would be determined that would be a primary goal of mine. And I would do that because I feel as though I'm a hands-on sort of manager, leader, developer. I want to be I want to take problems head-on. If I feel like there's a department or an employee that's not doing what we're talking about here, I don't want to let that fester. I would bring that person in terms of goal setting, for example, and just say, you know, we have to learn to communicate better and work with each other. And I'm quite firm in that.
Thank you.
Next question is mine. It has to do with finance. Can you please tell us a little bit about your style in financial planning, including the development of the budget, capital improvement plans?
Well, my style is to be very fastidious about it. I've already asked the department heads this year to accelerate their budget submission and their capital submission schedules. Some of that's not going to be feasible because of the underlying boards that work with the department heads that haven't met or won't meet until January. And I had asked that the initial draft budgets be available by December 31st, which I realize is at least a month, if not 6 weeks in advance of when it ordinarily is. But I don't necessarily think the first budget is the last budget, and I want an opportunity to be able to speak with each department head in depth about particulars that he or she may think are necessary in their budget. And as far as capital, capital's sort of an ongoing thing. I realize we view it in the same time frame of the fiscal year, but I want those conversations to go on all the time. I don't want somebody to say, well, gee, I can't talk to the town manager about a capital project until December or January. I firmly believe in having an open door conversational management style. And I think that once that becomes evident, which I think it already is, that people will be inclined to approach me with those topics. But if I need to put a label on myself, I guess I'll call myself a fiscal conservative. I'm very concerned about the mill rate, as the council is, and what expenditures mean for the tax-paying public. I don't know anybody that really relishes paying real estate tax, but those of us in public service know that the bang for the buck is pretty significant, especially in a municipality. So I'm mindful of the necessity to take great care in fiscal matters.
Thank you.
The next piece is about human resource systems and collective bargaining. A very important part of being the town manager is managing the HR system. The question is, but it seems foolish for you to answer this, but you can. Are you familiar with the situation with the East Long Meadow HR system?
Or you can pass.
Or you can pass. What has been your experience in building and managing an HR system and processes? And then related to human resources, one of the key responsibilities of the town manager is the collective bargaining piece. And please then elaborate on your experience in this area, and how do you see you would go forward executing that responsibility?
I pass. Well, as you know, HR is, I'm going to describe it in the vernacular as a big black hole here for now. Unfortunately, it's been a big black hole for over a year, and I realize I'm not telling any of you anything you don't know already. The biggest problem with that is, aside from the fact that we don't have a system in place, is that the absence of that over that length of time has just made a difficult situation worse. The HR director, pro tem, if you will, is a person who has a great deal of experience, and in a period of about 2 months working with me and with other employees in the town hall, has really started to bring some cohesiveness and a sense of stability to that whole process. We're trying very hard to consolidate our records, which were scattered about the building, not vetted, not purged timely, not secured, not stored properly. All of that is now under control. The bigger problem, though, I mean, these are sort of the mundane tasks that I'm just referring to off the top of my head, but the bigger problem is we don't have training in place for managers and employees on our hiring practices, on our disciplinary practices. Our annual evaluations aren't often timely, if done at all. Performance improvement plans for people haven't been adhered to. The lack of training has given rise to some employment actions that have given rise to some litigation. These are problems that, you know, some of them would occur in the ordinary course of business, but we have a multitude of them, and they are avoidable. And going forward, I expect that they will be avoided. We've already put in some plans to have some trainings for managers. There was one this week about unemployment claims. There's going to be a FMLA and COBRA special training by the Employers Association of Western Mass, of the Northeast rather, in early January. I take this as a very, very serious aspect of the town manager's position. I mean, we have to get that right. We have to get that right, because the failure to do that is really unfair to employees. It's unfair to the town. It's unfair to the taxpayers, because we're just kind of not paying enough attention to that very, very important subject, which gets more complicated with each passing month. There's more state and federal regulations coming into effect all the time. So, in my experience with it is that when it's not in place, it's a big problem. I had some experience in my recent employment in Hamden. They had no personnel handbook. We created that. Did the same thing in the parking authority, did the same thing in the district attorney's office. So my experience has been in creating these documents and kind of putting an organization together in that HR aspect of things. So,
Thank you.
Grant writing. Can you tell us about grant writing and administration experience, and what grant-funded projects have you successfully completed?
the grant writing that I've done was with the district attorney's office, which was a few years ago, creating positions for, the one that is the most recent in my recollection was a special grant that we created a funding for a position for, I never get this right when I try to say it, survivors of homicide, families of survivors of homicide. So that sounds like a contradiction, that there wouldn't be a survivor of homicide, but it's their families. And in the DA's office, back when I was there with DA Mastriani, we created that position as a victim witness advocate to fund that position. So essentially what you do is, what I had to do in that instance was formulate the program and determine how many hours was going to be necessary and what the mission of that particular occupation position was going to be, and then apply through, I think it was the Victims Against Violence Act. It was one of the federal programs that allowed for that. And at the parking authority, we had, I helped to write a grant that obtained electric charger machines, the first ones in Springfield's history, I might add. The Commonwealth of Mass had a special program, Green Energy, or I forget its actual name, but it was in that vein. And so we were able to purchase 4 electric charger machines for the city garages, and we also converted the parking enforcement officers used to ride around in what looked like little 3-wheeled golf carts that had no insulation and no air conditioning in the summer and no heat in the winter, and we bought smart cars made by Mercedes-Benz, those little cars that are no bigger than a Bug. They're smaller than a Volkswagen Bug, but we obtained about 5 or 6 of those, and that's how parking enforcement was done afterwards, but that was a grant. Hamden, I didn't do any grant writing. We investigated like the community compact grants, but those, I mean, they're grants, but I wouldn't really call it writing a grant because the programs are pretty well established, and if you can establish the need, you can get the money. I don't mean to oversimplify, but I think that's how they work.
Thank you.
I'm next, Mary.
Okay?
The category with my question is planning and economic development. East Long Meadow is interested in balancing residential neighborhoods with the need for commercial, industrial, and retail investment. How would you work to encourage appropriate economic development that aligns with East Long Meadow's character?
Well, I think the first thing you do is figure out what the council wants as policymakers for your community in terms of how much of that economic development you want. I have experience from when I was at the Parking Authority with economic development. I was on the board of Western Mass, the Greater Springfield Convention Bureau. Parking sounds like it doesn't apply to economic development, but in reality, when someone's coming into a venue, a city, in fact, their first impression is their parking space, because if you're in a dirty, filthy garage and you're afraid to get out of your car, the necessity for clean garages and well-lit places became very apparent. So the issue of economic development is sort of intertwined with the demographics of your community and the structures that you want and the development that you want. East Long Meadow seems to have a nice blend. I mean, I think from what I recall from the assessor's office this year, I think we're still at 82 residential and 18 commercial in terms of property types or zoning. And if that's the ratio that the council is inclined to prefer and want to maintain, then I think you have to be very sage in your assessment of what kind of economic development you want. You know, we have a business district, sort of, so to speak, and the industrial park is commercialized, but then and it is segregated. So what I would do is deal with the Rotary, deal with the council, deal with the state rep and the state senator about different business opportunities that might be available, where now we're up to our eyes with MGM as a budding community, and we have the ability to deal with them in terms of tying town projects to casino funds, if there can be that nexus established that we talked about at a recent meeting. So there's a lot of avenues to proceed with third parties, but I think the core issue has to be answered here in terms of what you want.
Part and parcel to economic development in East Long Meadow would be our master plan. And it's been a few years since we've had one. And I know that, or you know that, there has been effort, or some effort, to trying to move forward with a new master plan. Last evening's planning board meeting, I learned that the planning board was sort of ceasing their approach on trying to facilitate a master plan because they just don't have the resources to do it, and that they are going to look forward to a capital request to have this done outside with an independent contractor, if you will. As I said, that was news to us last night. I'm not sure you know that today.
That's news to me right now.
Well, so here's your opportunity. Our grants, I mean, this is an expensive proposition. A master plan has value if utilized property. How would you see utilizing a master plan in promoting economic development?
Well, again, I think that the master plan is fine as a concept, but I think embedded within that master plan has to be what we were just talking about. It's what's the community want?
Exactly.
What do you really want? Do you want to maintain open space? You want to maintain 82% residential housing? Do you want more economic development? And what category of economic development? Heavy industrial, light industrial, boutique retail. So those answers, I think, have to come from the community, and I suspect the council and the planning board is going to be quite involved in some of that decision-making. Consultants are great, and going out to third parties, as expensive as that can be, is often the best thing to do for the expertise that you can acquire. But I think at the heart of the matter is what we want. And once that's determined and defined, I think then it's sort of, it's layers. It's like baking a cake where you just keep stirring it and blending it in, and you come out with the product that hopefully suits everyone's taste.
Great. Thank you. Thank you. Okay.
Hello, Mary. My turn.
Mr. Henry?
It's on delegation. Serving as a town manager is a time-consuming job. Really, with a lot of responsibility. How and when do you delegate responsibility and authority? And are there any specific responsibilities you're already considering for delegation?
Well, I'm all for delegation, as long as the delegatee is invested in the project. It's important to me to honor others' contributions, and by delegating responsive and responsible people to important tasks, I think that honors their employment and their commitment and their contribution. So I have no problem doing it, as long as those two caveats are met. Currently, I haven't delegated a lot. I think I had referenced at one point in a conversation that I didn't feel that I had done a whole lot of town manager work in the first few months that I was here because of the HR issue, and I was doing more HR things, tasks. Now that we have a director, at least on a part-time basis, delegating that issue until the department is restructured has been a big plus for me. So all of the interviewing, the onboarding, some of the discipline that's occurred recently has been done by the HR personnel, which is great from my point of view. As you know, shortly after I started as the acting, the assistant to the town manager retired. So there was a period when there were 2 or 3 weeks when she was still here, when I was just walking in the door. And then there was a period of about 3 weeks when that seat was empty. And now the assistant that I hired happens to also have an HR background. So I've sort of put her on loan to the HR department much of each day, because I feel that I can manage what I need to manage right now. It's funny how we've evolved. I suppose it's evolution, but no one writes letters anymore. No one puts things on stationery and puts a stamp, and everything's an email, and it's a quick or a Twitter or an Instagram or instant message or something. So the communication that I might, 10 years ago have had by dictation and structuring a letter and sending out by post just doesn't occur anymore. So it's a lot faster. And so the town manager stuff, the tasks that I've been doing, getting acquainted and getting familiarized with a lot of things, I haven't delegated any of that yet, but I think I missed the union question. I'm sorry, my mind's racing here, but
About
about union negotiations?
collective bargaining.
Collective bargaining, yeah. We do have a new union forming in our emergency management department, so I've had the initial conversation with that agent. And I've also, unfortunately, we've had a couple of grievances in the short time I've been here that I've managed with the agents for those unions. And I did the collective bargaining in Hamden for the police and dispatcher union out there. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt your train of thought, Mr. Henry, but I didn't want to
You've
omit
answered
that
the
answer.
delegation question to
Yeah.
the best of your abilities under the circumstances. I also drew the next question, which is talking about creating a partnership with East Long Meadow Public Schools. Probably something you may not have had a lot of time with, but it's critical for a town manager to want to establish positive working relationships with the leaders of public schools. If not currently, in your past, can you describe your relationship with the school superintendent and the school committee? And I know Hamden is a little different, but still, what's your relationship there?
With school districts or school committees in the past? Well, I take great pride in the fact that I was a Springfield school volunteer for about 10 years. Not that that had anything to do with the school committee per se. That was a private nonprofit organization that, as you probably know, people in the business community go into schools once a month and they read to the children in class, which was a very rewarding experience. Supposed to be for the children, but it was more so a rewarding experience for the readers, we found. My experience with schools in Hamden, they were a district, it's a regional school district, and the entire time of my employment there, they were engrossed in the litigation that continues to this day between Hamden and Wilbraham. So I was involved with the school committee, mainly on the financial side when it came time to allocating the pro rata contributions of Hamden to the school district and the discussions around that topic. My experience with public education has been more in the sense of a volunteer or a board member, and it was public higher education. I was on the board at STCC for over 10 years and on their foundation after my 2 terms on the board expired. So I was educated in private schools myself, and my business career never had me cross paths per se with a school committee's work or a school superintendent. But I've already established a relationship with our superintendent here. I haven't been to the schools yet to meet the principals and the staff that work there, but I would fully intend to do that as quickly as I could.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Just to tag on to that, East Long Meadow is just a week ago from being notified that we've been invited into the MSBA process, and we now have the opportunity to get into their eligibility round for the potential at the end of the line of a new high school.
Right.
Clearly, that's 5 to 7 years out before students would walk through the door. But in your various capacities, have you had any experience with building projects?
Well, not from the ground up, but pretty close. At the parking authority, the authority is the legal owner of 5 garages, all of which were in significant disrepair and needed a multitude of rehabilitation type projects. So while I wasn't involved from the ground up, it was pretty much in the case of the Civic Center garage, which is one that you may all be familiar with. During my time there, we went out to design, and we spent over $1 million. It was like $1.2 million, just doing the basic renovations, which you probably would never know were done because they didn't really enhance the aesthetics of the building, but it was more of a safety and a security factor. The Columbus Center garage needed a new roof and new mechanical systems, and we went out to bid on those, and that entailed, again, the design and the bidding process. And the other garage that we worked on a great deal was the Taylor Street garage. Again, it was a major project for that, but it was those curbings that when you go into a parking place that you always cut your front bumper on, those curbings had to be replaced. They had all the rebar sticking up out of them, and people were tripping over them. I mean, it was, and the lighting and everything. So it wasn't construction from an empty lot to a full building, but it was the recreation, if you will, of several of those facilities. The other 2 garages, the 2 that are under Route 91, are not owned by the city or the parking authority. They're actually leased from the Department of Transportation. And they're also in desperate need of repair. At one point, while I was at the Parking Authority, a Jersey barrier, it was like a 20-ton piece of cement. It was the barrier on the second floor of the north garage, fell off the garage. And fortunately, not onto a pedestrian area, but that was because that garage was occupied in 1987, and let's say the maintenance was deferred. So I've had, some experience. I hope the high school's nowhere near that situation, and I'd be thrilled to work with the School Building Association and Mr. Smith and his team to get that project done.
Thank you.
Okay, Mary, the next question is about establishing relationships. It actually has two parts, and I believe we've pretty much covered the first part in your answers, but I'm going to read it to you anyway if there's anything you would like to add. If not, then we'll just move on to the second piece. Please describe how you would develop, manage, and increase relationships with other East Longmeadow stakeholders, elected and appointed board members, neighboring communities, state and federal officials.
Well, I think I already have the last two
Yes,
categories.
yes,
The state and federal officials, the
Right.
ones that represent East Longmeadow, I've known and interacted with for years in a variety of settings. So I know those people, and I have good relationships with all of them. Other surrounding communities, the same. When I practiced law, by and large, my practice was in the Wilbraham, East Longmeadow, Chicopee, this part of Hampden County, although I did go into Northampton and up in Franklin and even Berkshire County sometimes. But through that, as well as through my time in the DA's office when that was a county-wide office, I met and worked with individuals from all of the politicians, all the office holders, all the state reps from all those various communities in Hampden County, many of whom are still sitting in those offices. So I don't think that's a big step forward for me, or a big problem for me to resurrect those relationships. I think those people know me and already have a relationship. As far as East Longmeadow per se, I'm a bit remiss in that I wish I had been able to go to more evening meetings in the time I've been here, but I haven't yet. I've been to a few. And I think going forward, that's a first step, because we have a few departments that are working with boards, and I think I call it the evolution of the charter form of government is causing some fits and starts, even yet, 3 years out. So there's a few departments, I think, that whoever the town manager is, if that person attends some of those night meetings and gets to know the board members a little bit better, and starts lines of communication, that I think some of those problems will abate. And then other than that, just being present, being available. Eventually, I think that it would be nice to have maybe a town manager's message on the website page, what's up, what's new, like a little electronic newsletter of some sort. People aren't really shy about calling. I mean, there have been a few phone calls from the public, not a lot, but I think when people really feel compelled or troubled by an issue, I mean, they speak up. And it's hard to be totally responsive to every single person all the time, just for, the constraints of just being one person. But those are the types of things that might get delegated in the future. But so I think it's just being present, being available.
What about establishing relationships with neighboring communities with respect to regionalization? What have you done, or what in this job or previous jobs where you might have shared resources with another community?
Bless you.
Bless you. Well, we're about to meet on a regionalization topic with our ambulance service, our dispatch service here in East Long Meadow. I mean, those are two matters that are pending right now. In the past, again, I refer back to my time in the DA's office. I was in charge of community outreach there, so that entailed a number of projects that were all about helping the community solve its problems. You know, there was this opioid crisis that we're all aware of, has been ongoing for quite some time, and we were active in my role in the DA's office with starting a youth outreach bureau to have 18 or 20 high school kids that wanted to participate on a project. And it dealt largely with drug abuse and other things too. I mean, texting while driving and things of that nature. But the outreach went to the different schools, the different city halls, the different opportunities that the DA's office is very powerful, so that when someone from the DA's office called, usually people would listen and invite or accept a request to appear or to address their student body or their city council. So those overtures can be made depending on what the subject matter is. I mean, in terms of regionalization on shared municipal services, I mean, the Pioneer Valley Planning Commission does a lot of that. East Long Meadow's involved now with a potential marriage, if you will, with Long Meadow on shared health services. They're going to go out to bid on the trash and recycling project, and they want to do that mutually with Long Meadow. So, you know, there's a lot of opportunities for that. I guess some of my concerns are knowing who you're dealing with, because with the change in politics all the time, you just sometimes don't know what the tenor is going to be in terms of willingness to cooperate and financial situation in other communities. I mean, you're pretty sure of your own, but you don't know what's going on in other places. And so there's those issues that are could be problematic, but in the long run, I think regionalization is being favored on a lot of very important subjects just for economy of scale, if nothing else.
Thank you.
Hi, Mary.
Mike?
Our next question is in regards to citizen relationships. I would phrase that with the change of government and the loss of town meeting, our residents need somebody to be accessible, and that burden falls on town council or our town manager. So I'll phrase the question as, what has been your approach to interacting with citizens, and what actions have you taken to improve communication with residents? And part two would be, what steps will you take to become more knowledgeable regarding East Long Meadow?
Well, so far, in this short period of time, I have met several residents. Unfortunately, most of them had a complaint. I mean, that's what causes them to come to the office.
Shocked.
It would be nice to, meet them in a different setting. And I think one thing that I had talked about with one of the other department heads in an effort to help that department in its public relations is to have some sort of a community coffee hour, for lack of a better term, just to have a meet and greet sort of event that, hopefully people would want to come and meet and greet, but just to open the door to say, we're all just here to help each other, truly, and I would make that effort. I think it's important that the community here in East Long Meadow learns that they have a trustworthy person in the manager's office, that there's no favoritism, there's no hidden agenda, there's no long list of favors to repay. And I don't know, I think we're so cynical as a whole, as a society, that if you can move that needle just a bit away from that cynicism, I would consider that a major victory. And I think the way to start doing that is to open the door.
Thank you.
Next one falls to me, and there's many parts to it, and I think a lot of them you've already hit on.
Okay.
So I'll try to shorten this and combine what the intent of that questioning was. In your time here, I think most of us have had an opportunity to have some sort of discussion or meeting with you regarding various issues. And to my knowledge, we haven't had any headbutting, to use that term. What would be your direction or your position, and how would you handle that if you felt that the council was heading in the direction that you didn't agree in?
As long as you don't butt me in the head, I guess
Yeah.
I could have a conversation about it. I think mature adults can have differences of opinion, and they can express them with civility and courtesy and respectfully. I don't expect to always agree with everything that all 7 of you have on your minds. But I do expect that I would listen to what your position was, and I would expect the same in return. You know, the charter's pretty specific on who's responsible for what, but my attitude about this job and life in general is I'd prefer to get along than to argue about things. And I accomplish that by respectful communication. I mean, it sounds so simple, but I'm never going to insult somebody who doesn't agree with me. I'm never going to raise my voice. I find that to be unnecessary. I can't remember the last time I raised my voice, which is not to say I haven't been irritated or angry, but I don't choose to express it that way. I want to have a conversation. You tell me what you think. You tell me why you think that way. I'll tell you what I think and what my rationale is. And as long as there's a defensible or rational explanation or justification for what position you're taking, I think reasonable minds can differ. No hard feelings, no. We'll see who wins, I don't know. It depends, I guess, on which of the roles ultimately has the responsibility. But if I ever had to make a decision that all 7 of you felt, oh man, that's the worst decision she could make, I would hope that you would at least, over time, come to the conclusion that the thought process that preceded that decision was thorough and deliberative and fair. That's all I would ask.
To me, yes. If we select you as the permanent town manager, what would be your first few priorities going forwards? I mean, it's,
Pick up where you left off.
yeah.
I'd like to buy a new table for my office. My first priority, I think, would be to schedule one-on-one meetings with each and every department head. We have our monthly meetings, and I have interacted with all of them individually on one matter or another in the 4 months that has transpired so far. But I think what I would do is I would go home and I would set out in writing for myself how I want my goals to be implemented and how I want to communicate those to the department heads. Because in this period of time, I've intentionally been somewhat reticent. I've tried to sort of straddle the line and make a balance, knowing that it's a transitional period. I didn't want to impose some of the things that I will impose if I'm the manager in this interim period, because I thought, well, why put the employees through another procedure? I'm not talking like serious substantive things, but behavioral things, professional courtesy type things that I've let some things slide that I will not let slide going forward in terms of professional courtesy. But I didn't make an issue of it in this interim period because I felt that, well, that's me, and that's my style, and those are my expectations, and whoever is the permanent manager may not share those expectations, and I didn't want people to have to comply with, well, that's what Mary wants, and then we'll see what Ralph wants, and then we'll see what Tom wants, and because they're busy, and they're working hard, and I respect that, but that's one of the first things I will do. I will set my expectations out clearly, and I'm not a dictator. I'm not even slightly dictatorial, I don't think. And I'm not autocratic, but I'm clear. And I have expectations about what I want from people.
Thank you.
All right, my turn. What do we have, like 6, 7 minutes left, so I'll truncate the question. Career overview. So far, what has been would you consider your most successful or rewarding or rewarding accomplishment in your career? I think more focused on government, your government service. And conversely, what was your most disappointing or unsuccessful, and what did you learn from that?
So you're excluding my law practice, right? Is that
You don't
what I
wanna talk about
understand from
that.
the question? I don't really want to
Nor
talk
do I.
about it, except to say that every single client I ever represented, I took every single matter very seriously. And they were all, regardless of the type of case, I felt as though that individual deserved the best I had to offer in that arena, and I'm proud to say that they got it. So that's the first chunk of my life.
Because I figured, if I had the same question, that's where I would go to, into the law question, but I figured I would focus on your DA service, handling
Well-
service, and also with the parking authority, as well as your time here.
Well, I can take a little snippet from each. I really enjoyed my time in the DA's office. Primarily, I think because my law career, I was self-employed as a sole proprietor. And there was not a lot of opportunity for affirmation coming, I know clients were happy, but most of the time when they get a good result, oftentimes people would think, well, that's how it should have happened, that's how it should have worked out. And when they didn't, they're like, geez, I had to pay you for that? But, so, in the DA's office, it was different because we were a team, and it was a brand-new team. When Mark Mastriani became DA, he succeeded Bill Bennett, who had been DA for 20 years prior. And so it was a whole new, almost everybody in the executive suite under Bill Bennett retired when he left office. So when Mark came into the seat, he had a new management team. And it was new, and it was exciting, and it was, challenging, and it was horrible because of the underlying structure of what we worked with. I mean, mostly felony assaults and violence and lots of unpleasant issues that are very real in today's world. So, but we worked together to have these, like I said, the community outreach was something that he began that I oversaw. We had to do the whole personnel HR business that had been, had kind of fallen by the wayside a little bit. And then, of course, the tornado came through 6 months after he took office, which destroyed the building we were in and destroyed the off-site building we were in and upset everything for months. And that was very challenging. We had no IT service. We had a state police unit that had no physical premises, and we had a court docket to manage each and every day. So that was, there was a lot of adrenaline rush there constantly. And I enjoyed that very much. But I think it was the team aspect of it that made the biggest impression on me, and I think that was partly the timing of coming from a career in solo practice. The parking authority was great too. I felt in the parking authority I had an opportunity to really help employees. I had there were 4 or 5 staff members there, but 2 of whom were Hispanic males who didn't have great grammar and writing skills. And I hope I don't sound boastful saying this, but I tried very hard to nurture those skills. I got them a tutor, actually a family member of mine who is a writing instructor, came in and sat with these two fellas for about 6 months, because they would write emails to all sorts of people, and they just were almost like, I don't want to say illegible, but they weren't well worded and they weren't well written, and punctuation was absent and so on and so forth. So when I left that job, they each said to me, "You're the best person I have ever worked for." And, you know, that was very flattering to me, but what made it mean something to me was that I knew that no one had ever really paid attention to them before. So, and I know they appreciated it, the opportunity. We went to trainings. One of the guys I took to Boston with me on an overnight on a some kind of a parking convention, I forget what and I put him in charge of our on-street parking with our electronic, we bought a technology thing called Passport, where you could buy a metered parking from your phone. He never forgot it. He still texts me every birthday, every season, you know, to say thank you, and that means a great deal to me. And the same thing essentially happened in Hamden when I left there. I left under circumstances that I wish had been otherwise, but they are what they are. And I think by and large the employees felt some sadness at my departure, but only because of the way they were treated by me while I was there. And I was the direct supervisor of about 24 people in the town hall each day. But it's nothing special on my part. It's attention. It's just paying attention to people. And I think that's important to do.
Thank you. And so, as a way of wrapping up, I'll give you an opportunity to, if you have a question, pick one. If you have more than one, and we're happy to give it a run.
I really don't have any questions. I don't know if that's an interview faux pas or not, but having spoken with all of you, some more than others, but at length, I think I know what your expectations are by and large. I know I've identified some problems here that I don't mean to make them sound like the weight of the world, but there's some serious ones, and I also think I have the solutions for them, at least in the back of my mind. So no, I don't really have any questions. Going forward, if I am your choice, obviously I'd want some direction on specific goals that you, and policies, you know, germane to some of the questions, particularly from Marilyn's point on the planning and the master plan and whatnot, but I think you know me well enough to know that you can tell me what you expect of me, and take it from there.
Okay, well,
So thank
again,
you very much for listening to me for this hour and having me here. I do
Thank you for
appreciate
your
it.
interest in the town and the work you've done thus far, and
Okay, you're welcome.
best wishes.
And your continued interest.
Do we need a little bit of a 5-minute break?
I'm going to take them this time.
So am I just need to stretch a little.
Legs starting to come back.
Just starting to come back, I'm hoping.